we're going to have to get some window shades so that way we can use the other projector. It doesn't like all the light. Well, today we are looking at the Gospel of Luke. And we're continuing on from where we were at last week. Last week we looked at why Jesus was in the temple when he was about 40 days old. And that was for the redemptive price to be paid, as was custom. And that's when Simeon and Anna met Jesus for the first time. And they had prayed that God would answer the prayer that they would not die until they saw the Messiah. Well, today we know that after that at some point, the Magi came. It was a year or a year and a half, whatever. They came around that time frame. And afterwards, we know that God sent Joseph and Mary and Jesus to Egypt while Herod was out to look for him to kill him. And after Herod died, then they come back to Nazareth, where Mary and Joseph were from. And we don't hear anything in the scriptures from any of the Gospels or any of the other readings until this part in the second chapter of Luke. Verses 41 through 52, it says, "Now every year Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. But they were unaware of it. Now thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a full day. And then they began looking for him among their relatives and their friends. And when they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, 'Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously,'" and actually the Hebrew translation is torturously, "searching for you." "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. Thus is the reading. Thanks be to God. All right, so we're going to look at this. It's just kind of a short passage. And I don't know, who here remembers this passage at all? Few? Mostly your parents, right? Because when you read this, what's your first reaction?
Remembering when it happened to you.
You remember what happened to you, right? Who here has ever lost a child? Okay, let's put it this way. Raise your hand if you've never lost a child. Have you ever lost somebody that you were babysitting, even momentarily? Have you ever lost a pet? Right? I know a lot of you have lost pets because you see all the posters. Right? It's that panic. They were literally just here. I turned my back, and you hear this all the time. I just turned my back. Gone. Now it's even more scarier than even probably when I was growing up or when you were growing up. But that same sense of panic is universal. It doesn't matter what color you are, what race you are, how old you are, if you're a mother, if you're a grandmother, if you're an aunt, if you're a babysitter. That same panic happens. Where did they go? Because why? They're your responsibility, right? You have one job. What happens if you can't find that kid just right off?
Worst case.
Oh, worst case scenario starts going through your mind, doesn't it? Everything. That's where our mind goes. All the possible, horrible, horrible things. I remember, I didn't run away that I'm aware of. My mom doesn't remember when I was little, but my brother did. I always threatened to run away from home, but I didn't. My brother, when he was about 2, we were on a farm. I mean, you know, we were the only house on the mile, and we were a lot of miles from anywhere, really. And so it was afternoon. Mom had put Russ down for a nap, and I don't nap, and so I don't know what I was doing. But she went in to go get him, and she couldn't find him. He wasn't in his room. And I remember he was 2, so I was 5 at the time. And I remember the panic. This is in the summer. Mom was just panicking because she couldn't find him. We didn't have that big of a house. And she was looking all over for him. Nothing. Calling to him. Nothing. Nothing. We looked inside. We were on a farm. We were looking outside. I remember running and looking in the barns and looking out on the playground, looking everywhere I could think of, and we couldn't find him. Hours went by, and of course we didn't have cell phones, so my mom was beyond panicking. Where could he possibly go? He couldn't have gone very far, right? Well, my dad had built a captain's bed. I don't know if you know what those things are. Because it was a small house, right? There was a room, it really wasn't a bedroom, but we converted it to a bedroom. And so it was a twin bed, and underneath it, he made drawers and doors and that kind of stuff. Well, my brother had gotten down, and he had all these stuffed animals in this one door. Why he did, I don't know, but he got down out of bed, and he opened up the door, and he crawled to the back of that and shoved all of the stuffed animals in front of the door, so you couldn't find him. It was only because when we got really, really quiet, we could hear him snoring. And then we found him. Now, he was still in the house. But I remember that panic that my mom had. It was palpable. And me too as a kid. Well, fast forward. Again, Chantel was always threatening to run away. I do remember one time when she got so far as to the end of the driveway before she decided to come back. But Ashley, when she was about 2 or 3, I think she was about 2, we were at JCPenney's. Now, you probably know that department store. We were at the mall. And she decided to go under one of those clothes things we were in amongst. And I couldn't find her. And I just turned my back for 1 second to look at something on the rack. And she was gone. You know that panic. We were not at home. We were not in a secluded area. We were in the mall. And my anxiety was through the roof. You know, that's why I said I love this scripture, because when Mary says, we had so much anxiety, no, the Hebrew translation is, we were tortured. Anxiety's here. Tortured is a whole other level. I panicked. And the first thing I did, I left Chantel there. She was 4 years older. She was about 6, but I left her there with the stroller and everything, and I said, stay right here. And I grabbed a gal, and I told him that there was a missing kid and had him shut the door. Because, you know, again, you don't know. You can't trust anybody nowadays. That was at least a smart thing to do. But then so I had people from the store helping peruse. And she was hiding. I mean, not like just towards the edge. She was like literally clinging onto the pole in the center of that clothes rack that went almost to the floor. She didn't do it again. I can guarantee that. I know that panic. I know that because in your head, you're thinking, I have one job to do, and that's what? To keep them safe. So think about this with Mary and Joseph. They literally picked up everything, and they went all the way to another country, to Egypt, to keep their child safe. And they come back, and it says that they were at least doing the Jewish customs. That's why they went, and they did the redemptive price, and they did the purification sacrifice. And here it says, every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem. So that means, while he was still in the vicinity before they went to Egypt, they went to Jerusalem. I would even argue we don't know how long he was in Egypt. They could have left after the Passover and been back right before the Passover and still went. He could have not missed 1 year. He is now 12. They've done this, right? And when you would go, again, if you remember, they were in Nazareth. It was an 80-mile trek through hard terrain to get from Nazareth to Jerusalem. And it's all uphill to Mount Zion. So they didn't travel alone. They would go with their relatives and their friends and the people from town. Who here has ever gone to a state championship game from town? Have you ever had a basketball, football team go, volleyball team? Well, I grew up in McCool Junction. It's a little town, about 400 people. And I remember the first time we ever went to state, it was in basketball. And the boys made it. And everybody went to Lincoln, to Pershing, or I guess that was Bob Devaney for the final game. And there was a sign on the highway that said, "Last one out of town, shut off the lights." Everybody was gone. That's kind of the way these festivals work. And so you would go in a big entourage. Okay, you've been around family, right? Where do your kids hang out with? They don't want to be with mom and dad. They're going to hang out with their cousins. They're going to hang out with their friends. You're all together in one big group. And everybody just kind of helps mother everybody else. For 12 years, they made this trek. They would go for the festival and for the week, and then they would make their trek back. This was routine, not rocket science. But this particular year, now you have to realize, when a Jewish boy was 13, was when he had his bar mitzvah, and he became a man. So Jesus isn't 13 yet. He's only 12. Folks are probably not thinking about anything yet. They get ready to leave, like they always do. Now, I am sure at some point in that morning, they had their eyes on Jesus. And the whole group got up to go. They honestly didn't know he wasn't with them. It's not that far of a stretch. But they had walked a whole day. Think about this. We're talking probably 20 miles maybe. If they were 80 miles away, that would still take 4 days to get there, if you even walked 20 miles. Well, that would have been downhill. When they finally get there at night, they go, Mary's sister Joseph, have you seen Jesus? No, I haven't. He's always probably with his cousin. He's probably with John. He's probably with Lazarus, his best friend. They're looking all over. Mary's like, I'm just not feeling right. Something's not right. So she starts looking all over. Who here's ever watched the movie Home Alone? You go, how would that happen? Things happen, right? And it's that moment when Mr. and Mrs. McAllister are up in the air over the Atlantic Ocean, and she realizes that Kevin is not with them. And she does everything she can to try to get back, to try to find him. Well, here we see that Mary and Joseph do the same thing. When they realize he is not with them, beyond panicked, they make the trek back. Only now we're talking 20 miles uphill. You can only imagine what's going through their mind. And as they finally get to Jerusalem, does it say that they found him right away? No, this is the part that a lot of people miss. How long did they look for him?
3 days.
3 days! I know how panicked my mom was for 2 hours trying to find my brother. I know how panicked I was. What seemed like a whole day was probably only 15 minutes before we found Ashley. Can you imagine 3 days? This is Jerusalem. That would be like taking your child and being lost in North Omaha for 3 days, or Kansas City, or St. Louis, or Chicago, or New York. What would be going through your mind? Not good. Especially when you did not find him in day 1. You had not found him in day 2. You had not found him in day 3. Can you imagine they've been yelling there, have you found Jesus? Have you found Jesus? Finally, though, I find this interesting. Jesus had not moved. He stayed, you mentioned the same spot, the whole time. And where was he? It says he was in the temple courts. Now, he couldn't be in the temple because he's only 12 years old. So the temple courts is the big area around the temple. Now again, that's a big, big area. They could have even been looking in the temple courts and not have found him. But he was sitting, not by himself, not messing in the corner with birds. He was sitting at the feet of the other rabbis, the other teachers, the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees. He was listening to them, and he was asking questions. Now, you can only imagine the questions that he was asking. He was probably asking questions that was throwing it back on the teachers, because it said they were amazed. They were blown away at this child who's 12 years old, at his understanding. Someone who came from Nazareth. His father was not a priest. His father was not a very learned person who was teaching them everything. No, he was a carpenter. He was a stonesmith. He was a mason. And yet Jesus had understanding like nothing that they had ever seen, especially for someone 12. And his answers. Now it says when his parents finally see them. Can you imagine what had to go through Mary's mind or Joseph's mind the minute they locked eyes on their child? And then there's that rage, right? I'm sure that would just be me, right? You're so thankful that they're still alive. You're like, I'm gonna kill you. They were so relieved that they found him. And she rushes up to them, and I love the word, son, why have you treated us like this? You said that, right? Why did you do this to me? Your father and I have been tortuously searching for you for 3 days. But then what does Jesus say? Why were you searching for me? That would be hard, wouldn't it? I really wanted to see that interaction between his folks and Jesus. Because you have to realize they both knew that he was the Messiah. They knew he was the Son of God when he was born. They remember the shepherds. They remember everything that had gone on. They remember the prophecies for Anna and Simeon. They remember the Magi coming. They remember having to flee to Egypt, but now they've come back, and probably 10 years, 8 years have gone on, and nothing. Have you ever had anything so spectacular happen to you, you're like, I'm never going to forget this? You know, you want to hold on to that feeling, but then time goes on, and then you go, is that even real? This is just, am I conjuring up things in my mind? You know, I know I did it, I experienced it, but I just can't feel that anymore. I'm sure that's what they had to feel like. They'd just been parents to a normal child. And it isn't until here that all of a sudden they get smacked right in the face with the reality that he's not like their other children. He's different. He's the Son of God. He said, didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house? Think about Joseph for just a minute. Joseph has known all along he's not his dad. He's his stepdad. But he has taken him and he's raised him and he's thought of him as his own. That had to be a little bit of a wake-up call. It says, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. I think there was some understanding, but how could you possibly understand the magnification of this? This was that little blip on the radar reminding them that I am the Son of God and I'm going to have a ministry to do. I'm going to have a mission to do at some point. What that looks like, they didn't know. I am sure Mary was going back to the prophecy from Simeon when he said, your own soul will be pierced. She didn't know what that meant either, but she knew it wasn't going to be good. Does this mean it starts now? What's this going to look like? Are we supposed to leave him here? He says, no. He left, and he went with them to Nazareth. I'm sure that was a really quiet trip. Just the three of them going back downhill. They're not anywhere close to their group, their entourage. I mean, we don't know if they stayed or if they just said, go on without us, we'll make it back. So now think about this for another moment. If they had always gone with a group of people, When was the last time that it was probably just Mary, Joseph, and now Jesus? When they made that trek to Jerusalem, to then Bethlehem, 12 years before. All that had to be going through their head. They had been chewing on everything and asking questions. God, I don't understand this. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what we're supposed to do. I feel so helpless. But it said, his mother treasured all these things in her heart. Because that's what we do, right? We can't make sense of anything. We don't know what's going on. And we just have to trust God. Just store them up in our heart and our head. It says, and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with both God and man. This is where we get our whole plan, would you say, for kids. We try to train them up like Jesus grew up, by being obedient to his earthly parents, by growing in wisdom of the Word, by growing in favor of both God and man. You know, I think one of the things that we overlook in this story, we focus on Jesus, we focus on this pivotal moment of him. Now he goes home and he continues to grow up. I said this is a blip. They continue to go back to Jerusalem every year for Passover. This doesn't happen again. But you know darn well what was in the mind of both Mary and Joseph every time they went. You stay close to us this time. Right? Have you ever thought about the faith of Mary? This was not easy. When she said, "Here I am, Lord. Sign me up. Yep, I'll do it." She had no idea what she was getting into. Not at all. Has God ever asked you to do something that when you agreed, you had no clue what it was going to look like? Or what the outcome was going to be? So how do we do that? We can only do it on faith. On the ability that we don't have to know the ending. We don't have to know the future. We just have to know that God is with us every step of the way. Whether we're going uphill or downhill. Whether we're in anxiety or we're in relief. God is walking with us. I am sure that rang out, Jesus! I've been Yeshua! Yeshua! You know how many people are named Yeshua though? We're running through the streets screaming his name in panic. Have you found Yeshua? I want you to think about that. What is the definition of Yeshua? Salvation. Every time they cried that out, have you found Yeshua? People were hearing, have you found salvation? Do you realize that was one of the very first gospel messages that rang out through that town of Jerusalem? And finally, I'm sure they're not the only one that said, after 3 days, found him! My question to you is, have you found Yeshua? Amen. If you bow your heads with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you today, and maybe we've been searching and seeking. Maybe we are desperately trying to find something or someone. Maybe there's somebody who's walked away from us, and our hearts have been tortured for years. Dear Lord, thank you for reminding us that throughout that whole time, you were with Mary and Joseph. Even though they didn't understand, even though it was a signal to them that this child they were raising was meant for so much more, you still saw the human side. You saw their heart. You saw the panic. You saw the sleepless nights. And you didn't leave them in that state. And and you gave them something so much more profound. I know that there are many, not just here in this room, but those listening online that have estranged children, who have loved ones that have disappeared, who have slid off the grid. And their prayer every night is that they would be found, that they would be safe, and that they would be returned. Our hearts go out to all those moms and dads, siblings. And my prayer is that you would be that constant comfort, that you would be the answers, that you would be the guidance. And ultimately, just like Mary in her panic was sharing the gospel message, thank you for reminding us that even in those hardest times, you still give us opportunities to share the love and salvation of your Son, Jesus Christ. And we thank you that when people do, they can say, I found him. And we thank you that on those times when we are in such anxiety and panic and torture and we have no words, that your Son even taught us a prayer that we can pray to you. If you would join with me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever.